Welcome. This is Leading with Spirit, the show that gives you an in-depth look at topics like what it takes to navigate your spiritual journey, how to heal yourself and grow your spiritual gifts, and balanced practices to expand your business and your spiritual leadership. I'm your host, Spirit Bird, shamanic teacher, healer, and author, here to guide you on your journey to becoming your most potent spiritual leader. Hello and welcome. Today we have an absolutely fascinating episode on Leading with Spirit with our guest, Dr. James Roach. He is going to walk us through his fascinating and incredible journey, starting his career as a conventional medical physician into NDEs, extraterrestrials, and multiple dimensions. He'll share with us his journey on how this all came to be for him, his deep insights on where the medical community and where the spiritual community can come together and what that means for us, where we're going in the future, and how he navigated this in his life's path, life purpose, and in his career. I'm so excited to share this with you today. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And my special guest, Dr. Jim Roach. Jim Roach you're not a conventional doctor by any means, are you?
I would not call me that at all.
Yes.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yep. Dr. Jim Roach, who's sometimes called America's healer, he is an integrative, holistic spiritual physician with a national clientele. He's the author of 3 highly acclaimed best-selling books, including his book on spiritual near-death experiences, God's House Calls, and Brilliance, The Pursuit of Hope, Wisdom, and the Divine, which I am currently in the process of reading. Welcome, Jim.
Oh, it's great to be with you. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah. So I have to start out with a quick tease that Dr. Roach and I have met a few months ago. And so I know him by one of his spiritual names. So it feels a little bit strange to call you Jim right now.
I was a little surprised that you used that name, but yeah, I still go by that name too.
So I might call you Imhotep throughout the rest of this. We'll see.
Yeah, and I respond to both names. So
wonderful. Well, welcome. So so you tell me a little bit about your work that you're doing right now, how you started, and I kind of teased that you're not conventional by any means. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that journey for you.
Right. Well, I started out conventional, though. I trained for in family medicine, and my first 20 years of practice were conventional family medicine. And it wasn't until I was approaching 50 years of age, I wanted to see how well I could live. And I started reading more journals and heard about Andrew Weil, his nutrition and health conferences out in Arizona. So I visited those. And then he did a conference in New York City on botanical medicine at Columbia University. And I thought, I would never want to go to New York City, and I will never use herbs in my practice at all. Why would I want to go to that? But my intuition said, go to that. And I listened to my intuition, and it's transformed my life. That led up to me attending Medicines from the Earth conference in Black Mountain, North Carolina, where I heard Donnie Yance, the top botanical medicine expert in the country. I went to Ashland, Oregon, and studied under him. He's been my mentor for the last 17 years. So botanical medicine is a key thing that I do, particularly cancer. I'm probably the number one botanical medicine physician in the country at this point. And certainly as far as healing cancer, I have a national clientele. I've consulted with patients from Mexico, from Nigeria, from Australia. So even an international presence in that regard. Then around 2005, I attended an American Board for Integrative Holistic Medicine conference. And Dr. Robert Anderson there, I learned about energy medicine. And he had had a number of metaphysical experiences and stories that he shared with me as we walked around the campus that just blew me away. And that was kind of my introduction to my future pathway. Around 2012, a patient shared a spiritual near-death experience story with me, and they said they were mad about coming back and didn't care if they lived or died. And I thought, what do you mean? Here I've been studying my whole life
Right.
learning how to save your life, and you don't care whether you live or
Right.
die. And I
Why are you here with me
think,
then?
right. And I thought, well, that's pretty nice. And I thought, oh, wouldn't that be nice if I could convince my patients of that? And I thought, well, what a preposterous thought that I would be able to do that. But I started exploring with patients. Now I've had 94 patients with spiritual near-death experiences, nearly 900 with transformative spiritual events, premonitions, intuitions, out-of-body
Mhm.
experiences, voices, visions, dreams with meaning, seeing and sensing spirits. So that was very transformative. I got a handle on quantum physics, E equals MC squared, slit light experiment, and other key research that helped me gain an awareness of the universe. And patients started talking about UFOs. I've heard 25 compelling stories from patients and even from a Catholic priest about their experiences in relation to UFOs. I've had 3 or 4 that reported face-to-face encounters with ETs. So they didn't teach any of this in medical school. This was a real revelation, and this has certainly transformed my life immensely
Yeah.
and my goals.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm curious, was when the veil began to open for you to these alternative experiences or spiritual experiences, was that something that like started to change for you over time as you started to hear more and more about this and started to get more interest, or was there really one moment that you were like, whoa, this has changed for me?
Largely, it was a gradual process, but there was one particular experience that I'll obviously never forget. I had a patient who came to see me as a new patient, and then a month later, she showed up at the desk of our office and said, "I need to see Dr. Roach right away." And my wife was the receptionist and said, "Well, he's booked out 3 or 4 months." And she said, "You don't understand. I need to see him today, right now." And my wife knew to work her in. I walked in the room, and this is a woman who'd had 3 spiritual near-death experiences. And I've learned that the more experiences you have, the more intuitive, the more gifted you become in association with that. And this woman shared with me, well, first she took my index finger and middle finger, and then fourth finger and middle finger. And I'd planned to have a conference. I just planned a month prior to that to put together a conference for just a month into the future, and I really hadn't planned very well, and only maybe a couple of people had expressed interest in it. But this woman had shared that she'd had a vision. Now she was living in Colorado with her husband, and she had a vision of the word Ashland and a college on a hill. And she didn't know what that riddle meant, but she knew she had to solve it. And she went to Ashland, Oregon to try to find answers. Then she and her husband moved to Central Kentucky, and then she came to see me at the office. And after she left after the first visit, she found a college on a hill on the edge of Midway. And then she did a YouTube search and found me giving a testimonial for Mederi Foundation in Ashland, Oregon, and figured out I was the one that connected the dots.
Mm.
So she told me that this conference, so I'd not told her about the conference, and certainly had not told anyone, not even my wife to my knowledge, about where it was going to be. She said, the conference you're going to have next month at Midway College is supposed to happen. And that's the message that I'm supposed to give you. And it's a powerful message because it caused me to go to Ashland, Oregon. It caused my husband and I to move to Central Kentucky to come see you as a patient to give you that message. So whoever's behind this is very powerful. And I also asked, well, I'm thinking about writing a book. He said, that's written in stone. Of course, I've written 3 books since then. And then I was supposed to learn how to meditate. She showed me how, and I tried it a few times, but it really didn't stick. Only in the last 6, 7 months have I really been focused heavily on meditation with that. But after that experience, I think that sealed the deal in terms of what my purpose was, and that was important in the process of changing, helping the country evolve into a more spiritual place.
Mhm. What did you think when she gave you that message? Where, I mean, you were somewhat accustomed to this at that point, but probably not that extreme.
Right. I was surprised, obviously, with that situation. Having the patients share their spiritual near-death stories and transformative spiritual events, I
Mhm.
knew that that was kind of a special thing. I did not heard other doctors talk about their patients sharing those experiences. So I knew that, my mission was different from what others would be. And this really sealed the deal that I had the mission to educate, certainly on integrative healthcare was a big part of that, but also I think the spiritual aspect that I was learning through these transformative spiritual events, that was an important part of my mission here on this earth.
Mhm. Do you think that that's why a lot of clients opened up to you about their spiritual experience?
Mm. Well, yeah, because I could always open the conversation with, I've had, patients with spiritual near-death experiences, and they share this. Have you had anything unusual like that happen to you? And you have to have a trust. The patients have to trust you because they'll tell me a spiritual story, a premonition or intuition, and they'll say, I haven't even told my spouse that story. You're the first person I've opened up with about that story. And then as I was getting close to finishing my book, I had a patient say, well, an angel sent me to see you. And she was serious. She wasn't smiling or joking. She was dead serious when she shared that. So I knew that that book was supposed to be written at that point, and that I was supposed to help patients connect into their spiritual roots, let them know that they're not schizophrenic. Now, of course, if they have harmful thoughts, that's totally different. But these were patients that were receiving loving messages, intuitions, some predicting the future, and some about events in the past as well. But this whole process has just totally transformed the way I think about the world and the universe.
Mhm. I want to come back to your practice in a little bit, but while we're on this thread,
Mm.
so tell me a little bit about, after having heard so many stories from your patients, when did this kind of world open up for you personally?
So I started having some of my own experiences, was part of that. For example, I would walk with my wife through town every night, and there's street lights, and you would predict that they sometimes turn on and they sometimes turn off, and you would predict it would be 50-50. Half the time they would turn on, half the time they would turn off. I noticed that 85% of the time they were turning off and only 15% of the time they were turning on. And I thought that was very odd. And over time, as this happened again and again, I figured out that when it turned off as part of God's personality, that was actually an affirmation that had been a good day, that I was on my pathway. And then when the light would turn on, it would actually pointed out that I need to do things a little bit better than what I'd done on that particular day. So that was one of my experiences. I had dreams that were fascinating. For example, I had a dream where I was sitting in my church pew all by myself, and a bubble descended from the ceiling, and it gradually filled the full visual field. And then it was the face of my grandmother, Roach, and she had a smile on her face, and I could feel a physical warmth
Hmm.
when she was there in front of me. And I'd never before experienced a physical warmth in a dream, and never have experienced that since that point. And after a while, that bubble rose, and as it did, that warmth left along with that bubble. So I knew that that was my, predeceased grandmother uh, sending me a message affirming what I was doing. She had bipolar disorder and experienced electroconvulsive treatments, and she knew I was doing things differently. I think that was
Hmm.
an affirmation of alternative approaches to bipolar scenarios.
Yeah, beautiful.
Mm,
How sweet, how humbling.
mm.
Especially to have like not just the affirmations, but so much from patients and other people kind of coming to
Yeah.
affirm, keep
Yeah.
going.
When I was finishing up my book, it was very apparent that suddenly I was getting a deluge of patients with stories. So it was clear that, and I'd kind of asked for that. I said, send me more stories. I want to make this book as fascinating as I can. So I kind of asked the universe to send me more, and sure enough, they just unloaded. Another example was that I was in Philadelphia attending a Quantum Leap conference, promoting how I could write books and promote books. And I had to fly to Mayo Clinic to give a presentation at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. And I had a Chicago connection with that. But my plane was late, kind of taking off from Philadelphia. And while on the plane, I knew it would be a very close connection. I didn't know if it would connect. And I just opened up the universe and I said, whatever happens here is fine. If I'm not supposed to make that connection, I recognize the truth and will honor that situation. And sure enough, we got to Chicago airport. And right as I got there, they closed the door going down, leading to the plane. And I knocked and knocked on the door and nothing happened. So I missed that connection. And then I had the very last seat on the next plane a couple of hours out to Rochester, Minnesota. And I sat down next to a woman who was highly intuitive and had tremendous stories that I made a whole chapter of my book just about from the stories that she shared. And further, when I got to my hotel at midnight, the two attendants both had incredible stories of their own. So if I'd made that connection, I would have missed out on all that great material for my book. So the universe honored my intention and honored its intention.
Yeah, yeah. So a lot of your patients came to you initially with NDEs, and then at some point, some of the work with extraterrestrials opened up for you as well, correct?
Right. So it was trying to think maybe 5, 6 years ago, but
Okay.
for example, a Catholic priest was in and shared that he had been on a UFO vehicle and there was a translation device so that he could communicate with the ETs. Now, when you hear that story from a Catholic priest, you tend to believe that, right? And for him to entrust me with that information was because, that might have ruined his, I think, particularly in the setting of the Catholic faith, they're not particularly open to UFOs, is my understanding with that. So that was, and then I had a patient, a business woman who shared that she not only had seen a UFO, but that one night she had woken up in the middle of the night and there were four ETs surrounding her bed, the grays. They're about 3.5, 4 feet tall. And she actually recognized one because she had communicated with this one previously, and they said, go back to sleep. And she did. I'm sure they made her go back to sleep. And then she woke up with a drop of blood on the pillow, and she remembered them drawing blood out of her nose associated with that. And there were several UFO stories in my first book, God's House Calls, as well, and particularly Colioso, who was a shaman that I'd connected in early with life. Now, he shared a lot of stories, but the UFO stories, he said, don't print those, don't include those in your book. But he'd had two experiences where he was driving in Ohio and stopped because I guess he saw a UFO and got out of the car and then several hours disappeared. And then he was suddenly back in his car and he even saw where a UFO vehicle had landed, the burn marks nearby there. So those are some other experiences, but even more recently, a college professor who teaches religion shared that when he was 12, growing up on Long Island, New York, that he saw a 300-foot UFO. And it was just at treetop level, and he could have thrown a rock and hidden it. It was so close, and it reappeared 2 days later to where his wife had seen it. I had an individual share very secretly because she didn't want this story to get out, but she lived in a gated community. And in the middle of the night, she was drawn outside to walk around their gated community. She didn't know why. She went out at midnight and walked till 4 a.m. The next night, the same thing. She was drawn out to this event to walk around. The third night, she was drawn out, and then she saw a UFO, and she didn't have her cell phone with her to take a picture. She was mad about it. And then she was drawn out again the fourth night and did take a picture. And then she showed me the picture, and it looked like a toothpick sideways with lights around the perimeter. And she said, I don't tell anybody about this. I don't show this to anybody, but I feel like I'm supposed to show it to you, right? So she was, the ETs had contacted her to have her come outside to witness their presence. Uh, but yet she was, was very secretive. And actually, she had a background in the Catholic faith that made it particularly problematic for her to talk about this. So, you hear enough of these stories and you get it. There's an 89-year-old woman, here in Midway that read my chapter on UFOs and brilliance. And she said, yeah, my husband had seen UFOs. And then we were on the edge of Midway. I felt a special energy, and we looked up, and there were two UFO vehicles up there with lights around the perimeter. And when you hear this from 89-year-old Baptist elderly women, you pay attention to those stories. And that further, yeah, I can continue on if you want me to do so. But
I know you have so many, so many
well,
stories.
yeah.
So I'm curious, with some of these spiritual experiences and the way your clients have or patients have opened up to you, or just people you've met throughout your career and your lifetime, how does that come back to your professional work for you, or to you at this point? Are they starting to become a different path?
No, the fascinating thing is so many different aspects of my life and knowledge that I've garnered is all connecting in to one big picture. And each serves as a puzzle piece for the big picture. And so, first of all, it was a big transition to go into integrative health. I was the first integrative physician in Kentucky, and with my office, and now they're quite common associated with that. But that gets into natural approaches, and that's kind of a trusting that we have everything we need almost without pharmaceuticals for healing purposes, which translates into, some universal force, a divine force created all these plants for us to use. And if we're smart enough, we can figure out answers to all the problems that there are associated with it. So that was kind of a spiritual grasp. And then the spiritual near-death experience, the transformative spiritual events. More recently, well, when I was young, I read about Edgar Cayce, but more recently, a year or two ago, I started looking into Edgar Cayce more closely because in attending the International Association with Near-Death Conferences, I gave a lecture there on the God gene. I know I'm going a lot of different paths all at once.
Go for it.
Let me kind of finish this. The God gene, I figured out with my patients that most of the patients that come see me are estrogen dominant patients. And in fact, I think 80% of the population now is estrogen dominant because when we eat processed foods, xenoestrogens like PP and plastic water bottles, we're getting flooded with estrogen, and that lowers our available testosterone levels. And we're aware how sperm levels, sperm counts have dropped 50%, for example. So we're all becoming kind of high estrogen, low testosterone. And it's particularly tied into three particular gene mutations. And one of them, COMT, I call the God gene, where we don't metabolize adrenaline and we don't metabolize estrogen. And I've learned that the patients that typically come in, they often have burned themselves out because they can't metabolize adrenaline, for one, because of this gene mutation, but then they can't get rid of estrogen, so they have female issues, or even males, have problems with excess estrogen, like being OCD, detail-oriented, controlling, that sort of thing. And then that's associated with autoimmune issues. So anyone who has an autoimmune issue is kind of estrogen dominant. But these individuals I found out are intuitive. They're the ones primarily that are having these stories and experiences, and they have a connection with the divine, and that it's generally not a faith in a higher power. It's like they shook hands with God, right? They have a knowing and a higher power, but also a strong sensitivity, to foods, to chemicals, maybe to light, to noise, to mold, to electromagnetic fields. And they may go into certain shops and say, "Woo, that's negative energy. I've got to get out." They're empaths. Well, they can't stand to be around negative energy, but also they're very giving and caring, giving, don't feel appreciated and have any resentment. with that. And so they're gifted in their intuition and their divine connection, but they've been in fight or flight every single day their whole life. That's the baggage. And so they burn out in that strategy. And so connecting all those dots was another facet of all of this. And then botanical medicine is experiences I've had in relation to that have also opened up an awareness and given me another insight to that. I no longer question. I felt in the presence of the divinity. I knew that I was out of body. In fact, I verbalized that I looked down and could see my body down below. I communicated with my higher self. I got health messages that have transformed my practice in different ways. So all of these avenues converged to an understanding of the universe, and then getting a good feel for quantum physics, E equals mc squared, and spooky behavior at distance, which is quantum entanglement, which more specifically is mother's intuition, is the way most women would understand that. And then you see the whole picture, and the whole picture is love. The universe is about love. God is about love, and God creates through intention. And we have that same ability through intention to create and transform in an infinite number of ways, and learning how to harness that to change the world and to change my patients is what I'm all about these days.
Mm-hmm. I'm assuming most of them are receptive to this at this point with you.
Well, I've been told that their higher self knows about my higher self, and their higher self sends them to see me to talk to my higher self, is what I was told at one point. So, and I also had an experience with a trance medium, kind of like Edgar Casey. Now, Edgar Casey, was a famous Kentuckian. He was the father of holistic medicine. So, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it wasn't for Edgar Casey, who died back in 1945. But he, would go into a trance and would come up with incredible remedies of that day. He was consulted by Woodrow Wilson, by Harry Truman, by Thomas Edison, by Nicholas Tesla. He did 14,000 readings, and he was a strong Christian. And he'd read the Bible over 65 times, for example, was a Sunday school teacher. So, but he also talked about reincarnation, which was very interesting. And he talked about something called the law of one, how we are all a part of God, and that we're just little godlets, if you wish, but we're here on earth to kind of learn lessons to kind of contribute to the infinite knowledge associated with that. So I had a trance medium that I met who talked to me about my future. Well, actually connected into my higher self. My higher self had some messages for me. Said, you have a fork in the road. And I said, you're crazy, higher self. I'm 71 years old. I'm through with forks in the road. And said, no, you could retire into your humanness, or you could continue as a healer, or you could go this different pathway, because every other past lifetime you've been maybe a shaman, oracle, and a healer. And I thought, oh, interesting. And that was actually the part that resonated the most, because my shaman friend had read the oracles and given me the name Imhotep, which he was the first physician, 3000 BC, an astronomer, architect, and a physician. And so I really resonated with that name. When he named me that, his wife was with him, and her eyebrows went way up. And I understood that that might be kind of a special name. It had a special meaning associated with that. So I'm also exploring, the meaning of that. Am I a descendant of Imhotep, or does he represent my potential, or what does that mean? So I continue to explore that pathway.
Mm-hmm. Right. Getting to discover who is Imhotep.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And becoming
Yeah.
again. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm continuing on my pathway, and in January and early February, and this is being recorded late December. I realize it's going to run later on, but I'm giving sessions Sunday morning, in my church 9 o'clock till the 10:30, where I'm going to be talking quantum physics and reincarnation. The University of Virginia School of Medicine Division of Perceptual Studies has been studying reincarnation for 60 years. 2,500 children have come to them saying that they have been reincarnated from someone, and there's strong evidence for 170. Some of those cases are almost bulletproof. But even early Christians, it turns out that was the default mode of belief in early Christians. And there are biblical references that could certainly be interpreted as supporting reincarnation. And of course, half the world believes in reincarnation anyway. And Edgar Cayce, again, talked about reincarnation. And, the ETs talk about reincarnation as well. So as I indicated, all these pieces fit together. And that's what I find so fascinating and so, resonating and affirming with this work.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you kind of went in two stages professionally, first when you started to split from conventional medicine and get into botanicals. And then again, when you started to weave in some of the spiritual experiences,
Mhm.
how has that been for you? Was that scary? Was that overwhelming? Or did people laugh at you? Did people respect you?
It was exhilarating.
Mm.
It was exhilarating. I find my spiritual pathway, my meaning of life. So, fortunately, I live in a town of 1,500 people. I'm the physician in town, so I don't have anyone looking over my shoulder. And fortunately, I'm the product of my father, who is a practicing physician in Midway before me, who had done many great things, as well as my mother. Both of them were highly regarded. My father raised $70 million to found the Markey Cancer Center at the University of Kentucky, founded the Department of Family Medicine at UK. He founded the nursing school at Midway University. He was president of the Kentucky Academy of Family Physicians. So those were big shoes for me to kind of step into with that. But he was highly regarded, and that gave, I think, other physicians gave me a little leeway because of that. In fact, I did research at the University of Kentucky in relation to cancer, integrative strategies in cancer. And the interesting thing is, no one reads the research. There's study after study after study out there on botanicals, turmeric particularly, and all the others. But if you don't read the studies, then you assume that they don't work and these strategies are unproven, when the exact opposite is the case. And certainly clinically, been able to prove, I take on cases that other doctors can't fix. I hate sore throats or earaches. That's so boring. I want to be Sherlock Holmes. I want patients who come in with 25 different symptoms, because I can connect the dots. For example, I point out, that with every one of those symptoms in females, they're all better the week after their period, and they're all worse the week before their period, right? And I point out that tells you how powerful hormones are in this process. So if we balance your hormones, that's going to improve all 25 of those symptoms that you're experiencing, because they're all correlating with higher estrogen and lower testosterone, and things like vitamin D and zinc and turmeric and fish oil all help lower estrogen, boost testosterone, and therefore help every autoimmune condition, because estrogen, again, tied to autoimmune activity, help every female disorder, right? And that excess estrogen tied in with inflammation. So it's going to dampen inflammation and help all inflammatory conditions. And then psychiatric symptoms. Remember, anxiety, panic, obsessiveness. So all of those mental disorders, quote unquote, are largely connected to estrogen dominance. If you fix the estrogen dominance, that OCD, that anxiety, all of that gets better, the controlling aspects. And so it's fascinating that to be Sherlock Holmes and to pull all that together. So it's been exhilarating to see responses in cancer that I didn't think were possible. Right at the moment, I have two glioma patients, brain cancer patients, who used to be the one I feared the most. But I have two brain cancer patients that are in complete remission and have been, one of them for 2 years, another one for 6 months. And then I had an 18-year-old come to see me back in about 2018 with a brain tumor. And I put on my initial program and hadn't heard anything since then. And they emailed me and said, well, it's been over 5 years and the University of Kentucky doesn't have any protocols or information about glioma patients who've lived over 5 years because there hardly have been any. I've had really good success with leukemia and lymphoma. For example, the spouse of one of my office workers and the mother of one of my office workers, one had leukemia, one with lymphoma. The lymphoma has been completely stable for like 6, 7 years since I've been following. Leukemia is doing so well that the doctor said, you don't need to ever come back. Your leukemia has stabilized to such a degree, and you don't hear oncologists say that. So all of this is affirming, and then when I talk to the ETs, they report that what's the root issue with cancer, and they report anger as the root issue, and I would add the need to forgive as part of that as well. And so I address spirituality with all our patients, and particularly with cancer patients. And I have a prayer warrior on staff, and we pray with our new patients. And yesterday we had an autistic child coming in as a new patient, and I drew the whole office team into the room because there's a multiplier effect when you have one person praying or setting intention for the patient. If you have two, that doubles that effect. If you have three, that quadruples the effect. So the ETs report, if you have add an extra one, every extra one you add, it kind of doubles the impact that has, which gives us hope for the future of the world, because if we can get enough people around the world setting the same intention, if we can reach that 51% point, that's when we can evolve, I think, into the next fifth density, into the non-physical state.
I'm curious, if I can ask kind of a more personal-ish question.
Sure.
You're talking about your work with hormone balancing, and a lot of people talk about coming into the age of the feminine or reawakening the feminine, and I don't necessarily prescribe to that. I'm a little bit more of like, I think we're moving into partnership.
Well, I think there's a physiologic basis for that happening, because absolutely estrogen levels are rising and available free testosterone levels are dropping. No ifs, ands, or buts. And it's getting worse all the time. And Roundup, for example, has been a major factor with that. It kills off a lot of the bacteria in the intestinal tract, including bacteria that convert folic acid to folate, which is an important detox pathway. Also, it generates oxalates, which interfere with estrogen metabolism. And also, crops grown with Roundup have 1/5 of zinc, 1/5 of magnesium, and both those are important in blocking testosterone conversion to estrogen. So absolutely, we're having higher estrogen levels, which translates into two things. One, the anxiety, the whole world is getting more anxious and fearful on one hand, but at the same time, they're more intuitive, I think, and able to connect. And I think you're right. Feminine energy is rising out of that, which leads to a lot of hope, because I think the war-like characteristics of the male dominance has not served the world very well.
It's so fascinating that the connection point that you've discovered here, but also that it's happening by us essentially getting sick, so to speak.
That's right. That's absolutely correct. And another way to think about it is this: when I was growing up, I ate vegetables. We had meat and vegetables on the plate every night. But when you consume processed foods, they have other ingredients. They're designed to be on store shelves maybe for 3 years. So those ingredients are designed not to be digested, number one, so it interferes with gastrointestinal function. But those are generally metabolized in the liver, which is also where you metabolize estrogen. So in essence, every chemical that you consume, every preservative that you consume, nearly all of them are metabolized by the liver and therefore interfere with estrogen metabolism. So essentially all chemicals are estrogenic in their effects, right? So as more and more, thousands and thousands of new chemicals are generated, every year, and that we're exposed to. And as that continues, then the estrogenation of the world progresses further.
I have another wild card question for you. I'm curious if you've ever, I have two more questions and then we'll wrap up.
That's fine. Sure.
With your personal goal around living, I don't know necessarily if it's as long as you can, but I know you have at least a goal. I'm curious if you've ever projected your consciousness or imagination into a future life or a hope or desire for what you would like to do the next time you come around.
Well, so I've been told that, when this incarnation is finished, that I will be going to a non-physical incarnation. So I'm through with physical incarnations on this planet now. When I'm told, I realize this stretches the brain of maybe some of the individuals listening to this, and that's fine. If it does, just dismiss it if if it doesn't make sense to you. But basically, well, two things. One, you can think of a duality here on Earth, a duality that's supposed to be here, a duality of those who service the self-service, service to self, and another group that's service to others, right? And so those groups kind of clash, and information is generated in that process, which contributes to infinite knowledge. So we're here partly to contribute to infinite knowledge and to grow our souls in the process of our experiences from what we learn. But those that don't learn those experiences and those that are service to self, but not contributing. There are some service to self people, like maybe the heads of big corporations, maybe Elon Musk would be in that category, where by creating electric vehicles, it's helping the world overall be a better place, even though personally he may not fit into the category of someone you would envision as evolving to the next level. But because of the general good that he's doing, then he may advance. But at a certain level, the sixth density specifically, we're in the third density here, and Earth's evolving into the fourth density, and you and I are evolving into the fifth density here with our next incarnations. You can say the fourth density is kind of love, and fifth density is wisdom, and sixth density is, say, love and wisdom together. But at the sixth density, there's a convergence of the service to self and service to other individuals, and all of them then become service to others at that point. So it's like climbing a ladder, and you further up the ladder, then the closer you are to being godlike in who you are, and eventually you climb up and learn enough that you're able to fully reemerge with God. Another way to think about it is that we have groups that of commonality, right? And so if the Earth, again, if we get to that 51% with the same intention, then at the next level, everyone will have that same common thinking. So the whole planet will be on the same page. And after the whole planet gets on the same page, then you'll maybe take, the whole galaxy, the Milky Way, the whole Milky Way getting on the same page. And then when the whole Milky Way gets on the same page, then maybe a larger cluster of galaxies on the same page, and then the whole universe, and then multiple universes. In other words, it's learning to live together and love each other at higher and higher capacities. And so that's maybe the evolutionary pathway that we are on. We're to learn unconditional love, or to learn gratitude, 24/7 for what we do. And really, as far as judgment's concerned, from my perspective, we're not judged by God per se. We judge ourselves. That is, when we finish this incarnation, at least some of us, if not all of us, will have a life review at some juncture where we will be in the body of the victims, the individuals that we've hurt during our incarnation. And so we get to experience viscerally what the victims of our malfeasance felt. Not only that, we get to feel what their family and their friends felt and the larger community felt, right? So that's a major emotional toll that we take on ourselves when we recognize the adverse impacts that we had with that. But we also will recognize the positive things that we accomplish in our life. So it's our judgment of ourselves, which, may be harsher than what God would judge us when we have to feel what the victims of our malfeasance felt.
Mm-hmm.
So God doesn't judge us, we judge ourselves, and that's more than enough judgment.
Yes. I know I can't think of who said the phrase, but I'm sure I've heard it in many different variations that, when you judge yourself or another, you create an opportunity to become that other. And
Absolutely.
I've certainly found that to be true multiple times in my life, sometimes in not very pleasant ways, and sometimes in ways that really opened me up and expanded me to really understand and be able to embody the other side of the circle, as I sometimes call it. Yeah.
So, understanding that God is love. And that sounds trite to say that, but that's the bottom line. And I communicated with ETs and asked, are we loved more than we could ever possibly know? Is that true? And it came back a strong affirmation that absolutely we are loved regardless of what we do. If we do something, that we shouldn't, we experience the consequences of that, right? We suffer from that. We learn that, hopefully we learn that lesson so we don't repeat it. But that's why we're here, is to learn those lessons, to grow the wisdom of our soul so that we can eventually fully, reemerge with God, down the road.
Mm-hmm. Oh, beautiful.
Mm.
So my last question is, what do you do for fun?
Oh, well, I was thinking about it. I spend over 12 hours a day kind of in self-care. I spend 8 hours maybe sleeping, and then I exercise, and then I take lots of supplements, and I spend up to an hour meditating. And so adding that up, it's over 12 hours. And so a lot of individuals may only spend, 8.5 hours, right? And so they'll die faster, but I've been sacrificing 3.5 hours a day so that I can live longer and continue with this message. So to be honest, what I love as much as anything is, when I'm treating an autistic child and, see your parents' eyes and seeing the hope that I can give them, with that. So giving hope to patients and helping them to realize their consciousness, their soul's going to survive forever. It's indestructible. And we're just here for lessons. And regardless of what we do, everything is going to be well in the end. It's all going to be well. And just trusting that process. So to be honest, I could retire today, but I love what I do, and I see the impact that it has. And so I love to research still, and learn new things, but that's what I love.
Great. Well, Imhotep, Dr. Roach, thank you so much for joining us and
Thanks
sharing
for the
just
opportunity.
just the tip of the iceberg on your stories and your expertise.
Oh yeah, I could tell you lots and lots of stories that you would find really fascinating. So anyone who can come to my sessions, if there's an opportunity, January and early February, come to Midway, and I will be sharing lots of that.
And we'll be sure to share your email so folks can sign up or so they can sign up for your email list.
Thank you.
Your
Oh,
info
that'd
on the
be
show
terrific.
notes.
Yeah, great.
Great. Well, always a delight. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, and I put out a monthly newsletter. So when you sign up, I will send out a monthly newsletter with the latest integrative research, with spiritual stories, with a section on spirituality, and et cetera. It's extensive. I have handouts that I've spent nearly 20,000 hours putting together over the last 23 years.
So they can deep dive with you on all kinds
Yeah.
of different things if they'd like.
Sure. And Spirit Bird, thanks for what you do, for the positive energy that you bring to the world, the transformation of yourself as a beacon for others. So thanks.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Uh,
All right. Bye-bye for now.
bye.
Have you been hearing the call to expand your spiritual gifts and step into your next level of conscious leadership? if you're a coach, healer, or a spiritual leader, you can learn more about Shaman School and growing your spiritual business on our website, holtonhealingarts.com, or send me a DM at Holton Healing Arts. Welcome to today's Q&A episode, where we explore questions about spiritual paths, intuitive gifts, growing a spiritual business, and shamanism. Do you have a question for us? Send us a DM at Holton Healing Arts. This question is from one of our private Facebook group members in Leading with Spirit. And Miranda asks, how do I get more in touch with my spirituality? And of course, this depends tremendously on what you have going on in your life and where you are in your spiritual journey. But in general, the simplest way to do this is to take some time to get quiet, whether that's 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be like a routine where you have to, in order for you to be spiritual, you have to make sure you meditate for at least 5 minutes every day. It's just a matter of just giving yourself some space and time, even or especially in those moments where you are stressed, where there is a lot going on, where it feels like a lot of people are expecting things from you, or you're having to take care of a lot of people, especially in those moments where it's harder to get away, especially in those moments where you're stressed. Take that time, again, even if it's just 5 minutes, and just get quiet. You don't have to do a certain spiritual practice. Just take some breaths. Try to detach from the constant thoughts that are moving through your head. You don't have to make yourself not think. Just try to detach from some of those thoughts. Take a minute and just feel what's around you. Feel the earth around you. Feel spirit around you. Feel your higher self. Feel your heart. Any of those things will be fine to get you started. When you start doing that, the spiritual work will come easily afterwards, because you'll start to understand what you're desiring more and then can move towards that. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Leading with Spirit. If you did, please share the link for this episode with your biggest takeaway, tagging me at Holton Healing Arts. It would also support me if you subscribed and left a rating and review of the show, so we can support more people living their highest purpose. Until next time, journey on.